Hey everybody, this is Jimmy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's episode is being brought to you by our sponsor, Humor for Humanity, a social enterprise that I founded a few years ago that raises spirits, funds, and awareness for nonprofits, charities, and social causes. Our mission is your mission. Humor for Humanity. You can find out more information at jimmytingle.com. Thank you so much and enjoy today's show. Hey everybody, this is Jimmy. Welcome to the show. I am so excited today to have my guest, Marc Maron. He's back in town, ladies and gentlemen. He started here in Boston way back in the day when I was the open mic host at the Ding Ho on Tuesday nights. Marc stopped in for one of his few sets back in the day in 1984, and he has since taken the comedy world and the podcasting world by storm, and it's completely a fluke in many respects. And I will get into that in a second, but he's coming to the Wilbur this Saturday night. That's April 16th. This Saturday night, 2 shows at the Wilbur. You can get tickets at thewilbur.com, or you can also get tickets at his website, WTFpod.com. And there you can become familiar with his podcast if you're not already familiar with it, and his extensive tour date. He's got a ton of dates coming up. But for those of you who may not know Marc, for over 25 years, Marc Maron has been writing and performing raw, honest, thought-provoking comedy. In September of 2009, he's changed the podcast landscape when he started WTF with Marc Maron, featuring conversations with iconic personalities, check this out, such as Conan O'Brien, Terry Gross, Robin Williams, Keith Richards, Ben Stiller, Lorne Michaels, and President Barack Obama. I'm not kidding you. He actually interviewed Obama in his garage in Los Angeles. I recently listened to an episode with George Clooney as well, which is fascinating. And Marc gets into all this enthusiasm about doing stand-up again after this pandemic and getting back on stage. And he was just coming off a great gig in the Ridgeton Theater, I think it was in Connecticut. Ridgefield in Connecticut, which was awesome. And I got so psyched listening to that interview, just felt the importance and the significance of stand-up in my own life, listening to you just go on and on about how great it was. So he's a legend in the stand-up comedy community, folks. He's appeared in many television talk shows. David Letterman, Craig Ferguson, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Charlie Rose, and Bill Maher. And he has appeared, check this out, on Conan O'Brien more than any other comedian. And because Conan O'Brien is no longer on the air, that record will stand for eternity.
Forever.
Please welcome the one, the only Mr. Marc Maron. How are you, pal?
Thank you, buddy. That's quite an intro. I think is it time to wrap it up?
I want to make sure I hit all the bases. Great to see you, Marc. I can't tell you, man, how impressed I am with WTF and the podcast, because as you said to me off stage many times, this was a fluke. You were like working at Air America, right?
It was desperation. I think fluke is a nice word for that. It was one of those positive flukes, Like I just said this to a friend of mine. I said this to him honestly. I said, if the things that only happened to you were good things, it would be a great thing, But no, it was one of these things where I had nothing to do. I was going through a bad divorce, and I'd been I was out, they fired me from the job at Air America, and I had no idea what to do, but we were still, being that they were good liberals, they fired us from we were doing a streaming video show, but they didn't kick us out of the building. So we still had a month on our contract. So I knew people were doing podcasts. So we just started hijacking the studios, the radio studios late at night when no one was in them. We knew the tech, and we just started doing it. Bringing, guests up on the freight elevator, it wasn't the exact show that it is now then, but that's how it started. Me and Brendan McDonald committed to just doing a new show every Monday and Thursday. And that was the only commitment we made, and we've kept it. A new show every Monday and Thursday since September 2009. And It kind of evolved into the show that it is now. I figured out how to do it from my garage at home, but it was all like, I was staring down the barrel of a stage of my life, just doing, B rooms and having nobody know me. It was a dark time, Jimmy. I could have gone either way in the garage. It could have been, I could have been found hanging in there,
Oh man.
or start the podcast.
Well, I have to tell you, I didn't know Brendan McDonald he's your producer now. So you guys have been together
Since 2004,
that
since Air America. He was a kid. Like he was an associate producer on my first ever radio show at Air America. So however long that is,
yeah.
that's 16. Yeah, it's like a long time.
Wow. And so that's fabulous because he's an awesome producer and it's so great. It's such a great team. And I'm sure that's been a
Brilliant
big
guy.
part of your success.
All of it. You know, I like it. When we talk about like if we're ever going to stop, I'm like, well, I'm not going to even think about it. You got to, if you want to stop, we'll stop. So we have this weird standoff. We're like, there's no reason to stop, so let's just keep going. You know,
Right. So Marc, your roots go back to Boston big time. Like I
they
said,
do.
I remember introducing you at the open mic night at the Ding Ho in 1984 in the summer. Then you left
Yeah, you
town.
were. I
Yeah.
remember you were sweaty and playing harmonica.
I'm still sweaty and I'm still playing hard. I was the pink wonder.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember that place because there was a minute there. Because I did comedy in college a little bit. I was in a team with a guy. We had put together an act, but then he graduated. And I was like, well, I'll do it myself. And it was a very drunken summer because I was doing open mics,
Yeah.
and I was living up on Egremont Street in Allston, in a room that was supposed to be a patio. It was like so hot. It was humid. And I just remember buying bottles of vodka and going to play it against Sam's and waiting around. But I remember all the guys that I started with at that first wave. Yeah, and I made it out to the Ding Ho a couple of times. Like I remember one night you were hosting, one night Lenny was hosting. I remember one night I played against Sam's when Kenny Rogerson was hosting, and he got so shit faced that he forgot to put me on. I waited there all night. I still remember that stuff.
Wow. Well, and do you remember when Air America, 2004, we had the unconventional comedy convention at my theater in Davis Square. I booked you there, but you
Yeah.
also, I went on the air. I think it might have been with Barry Cremens on your show. You were doing it out of a
Yeah.
cafe there in Davis Square. Then we did a
Oh,
month
yeah.
long program of just political humor in July,
Yeah.
I guess it was,
Right.
of 2004. We had you, we had Jim Morris, Durst. I think we had Janine Garofalo. It was a great Cremens. It was an awesome
It's
time.
so funny. I used to live like when I was in Boston, when I went back to Boston, to start my comedy in 80, 88 maybe. I lived in Somerville before, anyone cared about Somerville. It was sort of like this strange little,
Yeah,
working class, little dark
yeah,
community.
yeah.
And I lived in an attic on Cottage Ave right there.
Well,
And then like when I was there, that's when they built Red Bones, and then everything changed after
wow.
that. But
So that's
I just
really
remember I
bad.
was so excited. Just going to Dunkin' Donuts. They built an entire bank building next to the house I was living in.
Yeah.
And so I was up half the night, doing drugs and doing comedy. And then they were pounding steel foundation rods into the ground with this drop thing at 7 a.m. Oh, God. But
Oh
yeah,
man.
I remember we did the Air America thing. And I remember those shows that you did. Well, Air America happened. It was an interesting thing. I got called by Liz Winstead,
Yeah.
who like I also used to do gigs with back in Boston. Like the weird thing about New England, when I talk about starting doing comedy there, is the whole thing was built. There were clubs in town, but the entire experience was built around one-nighters, right?
Yeah.
So being an opener, it was usually a two-person show, and the opener would do a half hour, the headliner would do 45 minutes, and you'd have to drive them.
Yeah.
So there'd be these guys that would come in from other places, and you'd just be in a car with some bitter headliner from somewhere, and driving to like Machias, Maine, and you'd hear them do their act twice. You'd sit there in a car with a guy for 2 hours and he's talking, and then he'd get up on stage and say this exact same thing. Who I could tell you who that was. Sam Greenfield.
Okay.
Sam Greenfield.
Yeah. Oh man, I
But
remember
anyway, yeah,
Sam.
so
He was funny.
yeah.
That's
And I used to
hilarious.
go like I once drove to Machias. I actually drove to Machias, dude, which is the furthest point east in this country, in Maine. I drove up there like 8 hours or whatever it was in my car to open for Frank Santos.
The magician. No, he's the hypnotist,
The
right?
hypnotist, the R-rated hypnotist.
Oh man, did you have to drive him?
No, I didn't have to drive
Oh,
in. I
that's
think he
good.
flew in. I'm the idiot driving. We
Uh,
used to do all those gigs, dude.
yeah,
Go to the Taunton Regency, Pancho Villas and Leominster, Franks and Franklin.
yeah,
The yeah. Johnny Yee's.
yep, yep. Oh man, Mark,
Yeah.
all those
What?
you're bringing such in, interesting memories back. Okay, but all
Yeah,
of
man.
that, I mean, it just makes your success so much more profound and
Yeah.
just sweeter from my
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
anyway. Because
Well, no one's gonna say I didn't earn it, Jim.
yeah. Well, I mean, really, it's all about taking the initiative in this business. It's
Yeah.
completely about taking the initiative because there's no agents in Boston. There's nobody in wherever that was in Maine going, "Hey, we want to really help you out here." It's all about taking the initiative and doing it. I have a couple of questions. Number one, when in stand up in this whole series of one-nighters and working the door at the Comedy Store in LA and working, just these one-nighters all over the place and just hand to mouth and trying to get sober and all these things. At what point did you think, "You know what? I think I can do this"?
I don't know if I ever felt that, to be honest with you. I mean, because you kind of go on this assumption. I was not grown up around the nature of show
Yeah.
business. I didn't know how anything was done. I just knew that I wanted to be a comic, and that's what I dedicated my life to. And for some reason, after a certain point, I didn't see any other way to go. Like there are certain people that are sort of like, I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work out, I'll do this. Like certain, at some point you have sort of a plan B, but then you get to a certain point where you're like, if I don't do this, I could always, and you're like, oh shit, there used to be something there. I don't think that, wait, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're sort of you're a lifer and there's no going back. But I don't know that I ever felt like, there was no decision-making process around like, now it's time for me to be successful. And it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a manager out here, I had agents out here sometimes, and I get opportunities and I had deals and stuff, but nothing ever went anywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, that out of desperation and out of just the ability to do it occurred that the podcast happened in 2009. That the fluke of it was, by the time I did the podcast, I knew I could do that. I was compelling on those
Yeah.
mics. I don't know why. I don't know what that is. It's a gift, I guess. And I like doing radio. But then, like, we did the podcast, and the fluke of it was that the cosmic timing worked out that we were there at the beginning of the popularizing of this medium, and the industry of podcasting just started to grow around us. None of us knew how to make money. None of us knew how to do anything. But, it was at that time that there were people building networks. We were all doing each other's shows. There was a sort of community around it. No one really knew how to make money. Are you kidding? I thought I was NPR. I was offering people donation packages. My entire house was filled with envelopes with a T-shirt and 3 stickers in it to people that would give $10 a month,
Yeah.
So it was unclear how we were going to really make a living, and it wasn't that important. It was just that we were doing it and we were engaged with it, and it was exciting. And all the early podcasts were just me apologizing to people. Like, I would have comics in, like, that's how I developed my style of interviewing. Was me, I would invite celebrities over to talk about my problems. It was kind of it was all service, Jim.
Yeah.
I was making an amends.
Yeah.
It was just me having comedians over and saying things like, I think I kind of pissed you off that time. And they're like, I don't remember that at all. And you realize how much of that stuff you're just making up. Like, you're holding on to these things. Like, that guy's never going to talk to me. And you go talk to that guy. He's like, I don't even know your name. Like, it's so hilarious.
Mark, I heard, I don't know if we said this off stage or maybe I heard you say it or maybe we talked about it before, but you were talking about the ability to talk alone to yourself on the
Yeah.
mic and
Right,
not
right,
have
right,
a
right.
guest
Yeah.
and just the confidence
Right.
of just talking. Did that just happen because you were late at night in the studio
No,
and nobody there?
kinda. I was always nervous about it. But, the real radio guys, it's sort of like, when you're a comic and you're paying your dues and you're building your time, right? So there comes a time where, like, I got a good 20, I got a good half hour. And then, eventually, you cross the hour plateau, and then, you have a freedom of mind. But it takes
Yeah.
years. So the same with radio. There was a time I think what happened was I had to fill in for somebody. I don't remember if it was Cedar or Garofalo or somebody, but they needed a guest host, and it was a solo gig, and I was terrified because you're thinking like, how do I fill this air? And you listen to pro guys. A lot of the right wing guys are very good
Yeah.
at it. Rush. Yeah, wherever the hell he's burning. Had Rush Limbaugh could sort of pace himself, and he'd just sit there for hours filling people's head with garbage. But he had a great
Yeah.
style, you
Very
know.
talented.
But so you sort of yeah, so you just sort of try to find the freedom of mind. You kind of look out into the world, and you gotta start to enjoy yourself talking, and also not really mind that it's not being received anywhere necessarily. It was like learning how to juggle. When you get that third ball in the air, you're like, I'm doing it, and I don't know how it happened, but that's how it happened, out of necessity.
And so from there, you and Brendan just put this show together, and then and the podcast was brand new. The whole style was brand new, and
Well, yeah, a lot of people were kind of doing radio shows, and we had at the beginning, we had segments, we had a couple of guests, we were trying a lot of different things. But once I moved to Los Angeles, I would generally do a 10 to 15-minute monologue of some kind about myself, and then eventually it evolved into a long form interview show.
right,
And Brendan's a genius, so his we are very specific about the audio nature of the podcast. We don't do video because there's a certain amount of crafting for the conversation that happens editorially. And and we just he's very protective of me, and he's like, this guy's been listening to me talk for 20 years. I'm like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So but our working relationship, we're 50-50 partners in this venture, and we have been since the beginning. And that's just, he's as essential as I am, and we have a thing worked out. We don't fight, we don't, and I trust him implicitly with everything, and that's the way it
that's
goes.
great, man. That's great, and that's something that just happened out of nowhere as well. Just happened to meet him.
Yeah, kind of. I swear to God, I met him. He was like 24, 25 years old. And, for years, after we started the podcast, he was doing, he was working at Sirius. He's sort of moonlighting with the podcasting, doing it under the radar. I couldn't bring his name, when I was being interviewed, because he didn't want to get into trouble with his other job. And then I remember there was I guess it's probably about close to 10 years ago now already, where maybe 8 years ago, he's like, I'm going to come on to the podcast full time. It's just gonna do the podcast. I was like, hey, wait, man, you got a family. I got nothing to lose. You sure you want to? Don't be crazy. This could all go down the toilet, and it's just me. I'm just going to lose my shitty house. But he was like, no, believe me, I did the research. I'm like, okay, let's do
Wow,
it. So
that's
we've been
fabulous.
exclusive on this. It's been our nut, our business for a
Yeah,
long time.
hugely successful. I just Googled it today. I mean, I know you spent many weeks, months, probably years in the top 10, top 20 podcasts in the country, which is remarkable. And I know you had
We
Obama at
still
your
do all right.
house.
Obama was at the house. We still do all right. They do this big thing where they it's called the Edison ranking, I guess, and it's really based on listenership, and we're still up there, man. We're still in the top. We're like 22,
Yeah.
23. And 12 years in, that's not
Oh,
nothing. And considering there's a million podcasts. But yeah, the Obama thing was kind of mind blowing. I back then I lived in a shitty little house, less than 1,000 square feet, in that broken down garage where I started
yeah.
the show. And I remember we got his people reached out, and they're like, you want to interview Obama? I'm like, what, am I going to come to the White House? He's like, no, he wants to come to the garage. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me?
Now, didn't you
And
when they first called you, did you think it was like a prank call, or did you think it was serious?
no, we knew it was serious because there was talk about, Biden doing it when he was vice president. There was people within the White
Yeah.
House that were fans of the show. And then I think what happened was, in that last year of his presidency, they thought, well, let's get him out there, because the possibility of lame duckness, sort of happens at that
Right.
point, and the last year of your second term. But he became a very, so it was like he wanted to get
Yeah.
out there. And I think it was a way to bring attention in a unique way. And it certainly brought attention to the medium of podcasting.
Absolutely.
And a lot was going on that week. It was a different type of interview than I was used to doing, because we We had a tight hour. We had, I had to do questions. I couldn't wing it. There was stuff in the news that happened, within the last few days of him coming to where we didn't even know if he was going to come. There was that horrendous shooting with that kid who shot all those people at that black
Oh,
church.
wow. That was that week?
Happened like that. Yeah,
Wow.
like a couple days before, and there was a lot of sort of stuff that had to happen. They had to come. The Secret Service had to come to secure the house, to figure out how to secure the perimeter. I had to ask my neighbor if it was okay to put snipers on his roof, and he was very excited. He was retired. It's the greatest thing that happened in like a year. The snipers are intense, man. So like, the day of, they put these two things, these isolated phone lines in the spare bedroom, these two boxes that are there for if the entire global communication system breaks down, that he's got a line out. And they were just humming in that room for 2 days before he got there. And I'm just thinking like, I hope we don't need to use those, And, and it was so funny because, you had Secret Service, about 12, 15 Secret Service, the cops. They had to tent the driveway, so we had a walkway up from the road. I had to get all the cars off the streets. And it's funny, I was out on the deck, with the Secret Service guys. And I'm like, how am I going to know he's coming? He said, we'll give you a heads up, 20-minute heads up. And then we saw, the presidential helicopter. Right. Like there's two Ospreys, these two small planes that are odd looking that travel with the helicopter. And they were going to land over at the Rose Bowl, which is 10 minutes from my house, as opposed to stop up traffic in the entire city of Los Angeles to get there from Beverly Hills. And like, I saw him in the air. I'm like, I guess he's coming. He's close. That's him. And then it's wild. He showed up, and he'd been in the neighborhood before. Went to Occidental, which was really down the street from
I
where
didn't
I
know
live.
that.
Yeah.
Cool. So was he friendly? Was he nice? Was he loose with you?
Totally. Very, because like you're kind of jacked up,
Yeah.
But everyone's just a person. He just happens to be president, and it's a big deal, right? But when he showed up, there's a bunch of people, and, he's like, is this going to be fun? He said, I'm like, I don't know. I hope so. And, but he's very disarming, very candid. I remember on the show, I asked him, are you nervous about this? He said, if I was nervous about this, we'd all be in trouble.
He's a funny guy. Yeah.
He is. He was very good. He was candid. There was a lot of news made around the podcast because he said the N-word in context. And boy, that lit everything up.
Man. I remember that.
That lit everything up.
I remember that.
Yeah, because after that, like we didn't expect that, but then I had to sort of insulate myself, because everyone I had, the reporters out in the street trying to get comment. I'm like, look, man, it's all on the podcast. So I did 2 interviews about it. I did Chris Hayes and I did Terry Gross, and that was another thing. Brendan was like, we're not doing nothing. Don't talk to anybody. Talk to Chris. We'll talk to Terry Gross. That's it. And I'm like, okay, no problem.
So let's go down the line. Chris Hayes, MSNBC, Terry Gross, and Tingle. Those are the 3 interviews. Tingle.
What about him? It was like in Tingle, right? No, I'll talk to you. But I'm just talking immediately following that, because he used that word, and there was like all this clickbait and craziness around it, both politically and otherwise. The right wing was going nuts with it. Like, why can he use that word? It's like, but they were just looking for anything. So we just detached from all of it, and I thought Brendan handled that very well.
Well, that's great, Marc. One of the things I remember you talking about, moving away from. I know you did a lot of politics back in the day when you first started, because it's on the front pages all the time, and we did a lot of commentary. Air America was clearly a political show. That was the whole purpose of it. That was his reason for coming into existence. But you also talked about what connects with people, and you were talking about your cats. And you were talking about how, like, the strangest things, you would be surprised that actually what connected with the audience. What do you think that's?
Well, that's it. When I started the podcast, both Brendan and I were like, we're not doing podcast. And we didn't, because, life is filled with nuance and stories and existential challenges. And that was really my forte. I think I'm better at it. When I showed up at Air America, between me and you, my sense of civics was limited. I showed up with a American Government for Dummies book, because I didn't feel confident in my understanding of the political system, and I had to do a political show. It used to drive me crazy. But all these guys I was working with, Brendan included, and Dan Pashman and Jonathan Larson, the producers, they knew what was up, but I was not part of the dialogue. I was just your standard kind of like reactive,
Yeah.
angry comic. So for me, it was like authority was the problem. Understanding the Senate was beyond me. So I had to, I was just like, fuck all of them. So I had to figure it out and, learn how to get into the sort of the dialogue of politics on a day-to-day basis and how it all worked. It was all a very hands-on education, but it's exhausting. And I believe with politics that, after a certain point, when you do it as a pundit or as a commentator, you'll find eventually you're not really having your own thoughts about it. You're sort of like following talking points and following an agenda that, it's hard to connect your own ideas with it because there's a momentum to it. And that bothered me. And so when we detached from it, we really detached from it. And I'll talk about politics. And certainly during Trump, I engaged around my fear of fascism. But, it wasn't really partisan politics. I am by nature a liberal person, but it was really existential difficulties. And I think, for me, it should be whether it doesn't matter what political party you're with. If you're an American, fascism should be seen as a threat, not as the future. So that became
very well said.
And that became, so that became an issue. But yeah, initially and to this day, I still kind of blabber on about my cats and like the breakthrough on Air America when I was on the radio was really about me overcooking some lentils. I went on this weird, and you got to realize, man, I was getting up at 3 a.m. to do a 6 o'clock show till 9 o'clock. And the reason we had to get there at like 3:30, 3 o'clock was we had to crunch news because we had to do news and commentary. And I had a co-host, Mark Riley, who was great, who, was supposed to carry most of the weight of the news, but we had to get there and put the show together. And we were also nuts and anal and like Brendan and Jonathan, everybody was like, we had to do it right. We felt a lot of pressure and we were writing original comedy every day. We had comedy writers. It was crazy, but I was exhausted. And I would get up, I would stop at Dunkin' and I get a 2 large Dunkins and a bag of M&Ms. And I'd start shoveling that into my face. So by 6:10, I was like, it was like I was on blow, Jimmy. By the time we went to air, I was sweating and furious, And I remember just going off the night before I tried to cook lentils and I forgot about them and they created this almost like this resin, this tar, and I just went off on this long riff about lentil resin and how they probably used it to seal arrowheads and in the past. I did this strange kind of primitive riff on lentil resin and it got all this email. People were like, "That was amazing," and I'm like, "Really? I got to talk about this more often." So then I just started talking about my cats because at that time I trapped 4 cats in the alley at my house and I didn't realize they were wild. And I trapped them in a shoebox and I brought them into my apartment and I just wanted like friendly kittens, but I brought 4 wild animals into my house and I couldn't get them out. So the adventure of the cats became this ongoing thing. And I realized that's what people connect with. What you really connect with on the mic, and same with comedy, if you really connect with it and you're passionate and you're not thinking about anything but telling that story, people will connect with it.
That's really, really interesting. Marc, with stand-up, I'm really interested in your process. I'm interested in the show that you're going to be doing at the Wilbur, but I got so psyched listening to you and George Clooney talking about when you were playing in Connecticut and how great it was to be back on stage. This was back in November of 21, but you were back on stage and just killing and loving it and thinking, you were saying, I don't think I've ever had so much fun doing stand-up in my life. And I'm curious, like I've had Colin Quinn and Gary Gulman and Paula. I'm interested in people's processes because that's something we don't really talk about as comics. It's such a lonely, not lonely, but it's just it's a solo enterprise, and we don't have any coaches really, no teachers, and you're just out there on stage, and the audience is telling you what works and what doesn't work. But I never really talk to many people about their process. So what is your process?
Yeah. It's so funny you talk about that because I just did like a run kind of through New England. I did New Haven, Troy, New York, Laconia, New Hampshire, and Burlington. And those are the gigs. Those are the areas we used to do
Yeah.
one-nighters in. It was so funny because I rented a car and I'm driving by myself in the fucking snow, and I'm like, I'm back here. It's back full circle.
Yeah, but you got sold out
I'm driving to
houses,
a
man.
one-nighter
You're coming in as a
in
star
the
now.
snow. That's right. That's true. And I appreciate that. But my process has always been sort of the same. I don't know if it's the best process. I always judge it against other people's process or what I think other people's process are. But when I'm trying to build an hour, and I got to tell you, during the pandemic, there was a period there where I was like, I didn't miss comedy at all. And I was sort of like, my first thought was like, maybe I'm all better. And then that made me question why I do comedy. Like maybe I'm fine now. I don't have to seek out, I don't have to talk about my insanity with strangers. But then the funny thing is, as soon as other people started doing it, I'm like, all right, here we go. That guy's out there. I guess I got to go out there. But my process, which I can see very clearly now, and in the past, is like I have ideas, I have things I've written down. Like I just wrote down that thing that you said that I said to you, and this is what my process looks like: a lot of post-its, napkins, pieces of paper. I just wrote fascism is supposed to be a threat, not the future. I didn't want to forget that because I never said that
Excellent.
before. So,
That's awesome, man.
so I don't know if that'll go anywhere, but I have so many post-its and notebooks. And what I do to really build an hour is I'll put myself in a position like this last time, I had a gig I had booked at the New York Comedy Festival. So right when we started to work, I knew that I had to have a new hour at least to do that. So that's in my mind because I never know where the new hour is going to come from. I'm always sort of like, I don't know if I got it in me. And then what I'll do is when I got enough ideas on a piece of paper, I think I had one or two bits left over from before the pandemic that didn't make a special. So I had sort of that I could hang something on. But then I'll just make, outlines and write things down, and I'll book out a theater like the
Yeah.
kind of theater you had. Um, like here, the Dynasty Typewriter, seats like maybe 200, maybe. And I'll just say, look, I'm working through stuff and I'll sell tickets. And I got enough of a fan base that are interested in that. I used to do a $5 ticket at the Steve Allen Theater and give the proceeds to the theater. And just like I would basically say, like, I don't know what I got, but I'm going to get up and
Yeah.
talk for an hour or two and see what hits. And that's my process is like, I am one of these guys and the joy of it is if I'm stuck on stage, some part of me knows at this point that I'm supposed to be funny. So if I'm talking about something and I don't know where it's going, the need to be funny will kick in, and then the punchline will be delivered to me. So I don't know where they come from, but like it happens in a real moment, and then I got to remember it or write it down, and then it becomes part of the act. So that's really my process is refining
And
by talking. So it's by repetition and just by getting up there, and like things get disorganized and things get lost like that. I think joke writers, have a benefit in that like they can just have a fairly effective way of cataloging everything they're saying. But with me, it's continuing to talk through these ideas and let them kind of evolve on. I just got a new punchline the other night. I
yeah,
like when things connect to other things and create callbacks. I did a show 2 nights ago and I got two new callbacks just out of necessity because I was left hanging. I was talking and I had nowhere to go with it, and something came out of the ether, and I'm like, oh, thank you, and I write that down.
cool. And are
That's
you
my process.
recording the sets when you're doing them? Those out? Yeah.
Yeah,
You
but I
you
never
record it
listen to
but
it.
don't listen?
I hundreds,
But you
yeah,
don't
hundreds of
listen,
them.
right?
Yeah, I don't listen.
That's hilarious. That you probably got 3 more hours
Yeah,
of unlistened to
I
material.
know. I just it, that's all that's left of my self-sabotaging. Like I used to be much more effective at self-sabotaging. Now I
Uh,
just don't listen to the sets, and I go,
well,
yeah, I get something
cool.
done
Well, let's
anyways.
talk about the Wilbur. What's the name of the show at the Wilbur? What can people expect? Because I wanna do my best to get as many people in there as we can. Because 'cause you're a great performer and, you deserve it, man.
Yeah, the second show could use people. Yeah, I because I just added that second show. So I think the first show sold out. Well, I mean, the name of the tour is
Okay.
This May Be the Last Time. And that's it doesn't mean I'm retiring. I mean for everybody. So So it's really just where I'm at right now, just talking about. It seems the theme that's sort of happening is uh is just sort of really reckoning with the amount of stupidity in the world, but also the scary stupidity, but also the fact that we all kind of know that things are, you know, there's something's impending and it's not good, and we all kind of feel it, and we're all coming out of this very traumatic time of the pandemic. But we're now that we're kind of through it, or else we're not really post COVID, but we're sort of fuck COVID. So but there's still that feeling of nervousness, and I'm trying to kind of like focus on that. I do I'm working on this very dark bit about, like, what is our place as an entertainer? What are we really doing as entertainers or as comedians? And I've been sort of stuck on this image about, when someone's when Jimmy, when somebody's like dying in the hospital, what he hears from everybody, about 3 weeks before he dies? You're going to make it. You're going to get through this. That's sort of what we're doing as entertainers right now.
Oh man. Well, I'll be at the show Saturday night. I'm excited to be there. I'm at the first show. I'm excited to be there, Mark. People can find out more about your.
I don't think I know. I don't know that. I don't know if I sold it that well. Let me make it clear that, I am sort of a dark-minded person, but
Oh,
it's all very funny. And if you're like-minded, certainly you're
of
going to
course
enjoy
it's
it.
funny, man. It's hilarious. I was at the one at the Schubert, the last one you were at. That was great. I look
Oh
forward to
yeah.
coming this Saturday night. I want to encourage my audience to come. If you have never seen Mark, you got to check it out. If you had never listened to the podcast, it's one of the best ever, and that's no exaggeration. It really is. The guy's a great interviewer. That's why
Thanks,
people
pal.
like Obama and George Clooney and Robin Williams and Keith Richards. Yeah,
George Clooney. George Clooney is sort of like
yeah,
talking to a
he's
president. To talk to George Clooney, it's yeah. He's so you kind of talk to him, and you're like,
yeah,
why can't he
he's
just be
great.
president?
It was a great interview, and but that's why people do the show because you're incredibly smart. You ask great questions. You keep the conversation going. You're really interesting,
Thanks.
and it's an awesome thing. And again, that came out of nowhere, and that's what I love about your success, and that's what I love about the comics because all of us there are no rules, and there is
Yeah.
nobody really guiding you along. There's
Yeah.
more support now than there ever was. There's
Yeah.
comedy classes and
Yeah.
all that sort of
Thank God.
stuff.
Thank, 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 thank God for bad parenting. We were all just sent out on our own to figure out how to live in the world.
Mark, what else can you tell us before we go?
Well, it's always great to see you, Jimmy, and I'm happy that you're doing okay. You always
Yeah,
make me happy. It's great to see you, and I'm just trying to stay sane, you know, uh,
right,
and not get too dry, live a sober life, and
right. By
stay
the way,
funny.
I saw that you're hosting a gala up in the Montreal Comedy Festival. That'll be fun.
I know, I know.
Yeah,
Great,
Mark,
great
you
place
and
to
I
be.
did that 2007, I think we were up there. Do you remember? It was me, you on the bill. It was me,
Yeah,
you.
Oliver.
John Oliver was the host.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Me, you,
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We were on
yeah.
that,
And
and
we
I
did
think it
it.
was
Yeah,
2007. Might have been
yeah.
Colin Quinn, might have been on it. A couple of other guys.
I'm very excited to do it. And it's so funny though about Canadian television. It's like I've been on so many of those galas in so many different Canadian markets, and I've never heard anybody tell me they saw it.
Really?
Have not a tweet, not an email, nothing ever. I got to be on 9 Canadian stand-up shows. No feedback. Zero.
Well, that's gonna change this summer. When are the dates for that?
Good,
When are the
good,
dates?
good segue.
Yeah.
What are the dates? I have no idea.
All right.
It's the
It's
Montreal
July.
Comedy Festival in July. Yeah.
All right, Mark. Great to see you. Thanks
Hey,
again for
good to see
being
you.
on today. Thanks for helping us out with this. And Brendan's been a joy to work with, and we're gonna ask him for some more advice as
Yeah,
well.
Brendan's pretty generous with advice. He loves you, buddy.
All right.
I'll see you later.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
Mark. Take care.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you for joining us today. This has been a Humor for Humanity production. I am the founder of Humor for Humanity, a social enterprise that raises spirits, funds, and awareness for nonprofits, charities, and social causes. You can find out how we can help you or your organization raise spirits, funds, and awareness for you and yours. Our mission is your mission. Humor for humanity at jimmytingle.com. Thank you.